November 11, 1982, Veterans Day, Los Angeles. Charles Bronson walked into Musso and Frank Grill on Hollywood Boulevard, one of the oldest and most exclusive restaurants in the city, expecting a quiet dinner alone. What he found instead was a homeless Vietnam veteran being escorted out by security, begging for just one meal. What Charles did in the next 10 minutes did not make headlines. There were no cameras, no press releases, no publicists spinning the story. But everyone in that restaurant that night witnessed something they would never forget. And the veteran, a man named Robert Morrison, would spend the rest of his life trying to find a stranger who changed everything. This is the untold story of the night. Charles Bronson emptied his wallet, cleared out a restaurant, and proved that sometimes the toughest guy in Hollywood had the softest heart. Musso and Frank Grill was not just any restaurant. Established in 1919, it was a Hollywood institution. Charlie Chaplin ate there. Raymond Chandler wrote there. It was the kind of place where you needed a reservation weeks in advance, where the waiters wore red jackets and had been there for decades, where a single dinner could cost more than some people made in a week. Charles Bronson did not go there often. Despite his fame and fortune, he was not comfortable in places that felt pretentious. But November 11th was Veterans Day, and Charles always marked it quietly. He was a veteran himself. He would served as an aerial gunner in the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II, flying missions over Japan. He would seen combat. He would lost friends. And every Veterans Day he took time to remember. He arrived at Musso and Frank around 7:30 p.m. The restaurant was moderately busy, the usual mix of industry people, tourists who had saved up for the experience, and old Hollywood regulars who had been coming there for 50 years. Charles was shown to a booth in the back, his usual spot when he did come. He ordered a scotch and opened the menu, not really reading it, just going through the motions. His mind was elsewhere, back in 1945, thinking about the faces of the men he would served with. That is when he heard the commotion near the entrance, a man's voice, desperate, pleading. "Please, I just need something to eat. Anything. I can wash dishes. I can work for it. Just please." A security guard's voice, firm, but not unkind. "Sir, you need to leave. This is a private establishment. There is a shelter 3 blocks down on. I have been to the shelter. They are full. I have not eaten in 2 days. Please, I am a veteran. I served. I just need..." Charles set down his menu and turned to look. The man at the entrance was in his mid-30s, but he looked older. His face was weathered, covered in several days of beard growth. His clothes were dirty, torn in places, an old military jacket, Vietnam era, with sergeant stripes still visible despite the grime. He was thin, dangerously thin, the kind of thin that comes from sustained malnutrition. The security guard was gently but firmly guiding him back toward the door. The maitre d' stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. Other diners had turned to watch, some with pity, most with discomfort, a few with obvious disdain. Charles Bronson stood up. He walked toward the entrance, moving past tables of surprised diners who recognized him. The security guard saw him approaching and paused. "Mr. Bronson, I apologize for the disturbance. We are handling it." Charles did not look at the security guard. He looked at the homeless veteran, really looked at him. He saw the hollow eyes, the trembling hands, the military jacket with a 1st Cavalry Division patch. "You served?" Charles asked. The veteran looked up, startled to be addressed directly, even more startled to see who was speaking to him. Yes, sir. Vietnam, 2 tours, 68 to 70. Charles nodded slowly. "What is your name, soldier?" "Morrison, Robert Morrison, Sergeant, U.S. Army." Even in his desperate state, there was pride in how he said it. "When is the last time you ate, Sergeant Morrison?" Robert's eyes filled with tears. "2 days ago. The shelter on 5th gave me soup and bread, but they are full tonight. I have been walking, trying to find. His voice broke. Charles turned to the maitre d'. "How many people are in the restaurant right now?" The maitre d', well-dressed man named Antonio, who had worked there for 30 years, looked confused. "I'm sorry? How many customers are currently dining?" Antonio quickly calculated. "Approximately 45, Mr. Bronson." Charles pulled out his wallet. It was a simple leather wallet, worn from years of use. He opened it and removed a stack of $100 bills. He did not count them. He just held them out to Antonio. "This is $3,000. I want you to calculate the bill for every single person in this restaurant right now. Everyone. Whatever they have ordered, whatever they are going to order, pay for all of it. And then I want you to close the restaurant for the rest of the night." The entire entrance area went silent. Antonio stared at the money, not taking it. "Mr. Bronson, I do not understand. You want to pay for everyone's dinner? That is exactly what I want. And then I want the restaurant empty, except for me and Sergeant Morrison here. Can you do that?" Antonio looked at the owner, who would emerge from the back office upon hearing the commotion. The owner, an elderly man who had inherited the restaurant from his father, looked at Charles Bronson, then at the homeless veteran, then back at Charles. He nodded slowly. "Yes, Mr. Bronson, we can do that." Charles handed him the cash. "Whatever is left over after paying everyone's bills, I want you to divide it among your staff. They are losing tips by closing early." Then Charles turned to the security guard. "You can go. Sergeant Morrison is my guest tonight." The security guard, still processing what was happening, nodded and stepped back. Charles put his hand on Robert's shoulder. "Come on, Sergeant. Let us get you fed." What happened next became the stuff of legend among the Musso and Frank staff, though they were sworn to secrecy. Charles personally spoke to every table in the restaurant, explaining that their meals were paid for and apologizing for cutting their evening short. Most people were gracious. A few were annoyed until they realized who was paying. Everyone was curious about why. Charles did not explain. He just thanked them for their understanding. Within 20 minutes, the restaurant was empty except for Charles, Robert, Antonio, the owner, and 2 waiters who would volunteered to stay. Charles led Robert to his booth in the back. Robert was shaking, overwhelmed, not quite believing what was happening. "Sit," Charles said gently. Robert sat. Charles sat across from him. Antonio approached with menus. Charles waved them away. "Bring us one of everything." Antonio blinked. "Everything, sir. Everything on the menu. Appetizers, entrees, sides, desserts. All of it. And coffee. Lots of coffee." Over the next 3 hours, Antonio and the 2 waiters brought out dish after dish. Caesar salad, prepared tableside in the traditional manner, French onion soup, New York steak, chicken pot pie, stand dabs, lamb chops, fresh vegetables, mashed potatoes, and a bread, basket after basket of bread. Robert Morrison ate like a man who would forgotten what food tasted like. He started slowly, his shrunken stomach unable to handle much at first, but gradually, carefully, he ate and ate and ate. Charles ate too, but mostly he watched. He did not ask questions. He did not press for Robert's story. He just made sure the man's plate was never empty, his coffee cup always full. Finally, after Robert had eaten what seemed like an impossible amount of food, he set down his fork and started to cry. Not quiet tears, deep, body-shaking sobs. Charles waited. He would seen men cry before, in the war, after combat, when the adrenaline wore off and the reality set in. He knew who did not interrupt. You just waited. When Robert finally composed himself enough to speak, his voice was barely a whisper. Why are you doing this? Charles took a sip of his coffee. Because you are a veteran. Because it is Veterans Day. Because you served your country, and you should not be starving on the streets. You do not even know me. I know enough. You wore the uniform. You answered the call. That is all I need to know. Robert looked down at his hands. I came back from Vietnam in 1970. I was 23 years old. I would seen things, done things. I could not adjust, could not hold a job, started drinking. My wife left me. My family, he trailed off. I have been on the streets for 3 years. 3 years. And in all that time, do you know how many people have looked at me the way you did tonight? Like I am actually a human being? Charles did not answer. The question was rhetorical. Nobody, Robert continued, nobody looks at us. We are invisible. We are garbaged, to be stepped over, and I'll get it. I understand. I am dirty. I smell. I am everything people do not want to see. But I am still a person. I am still, his voice broke again. Charles reached across the table and gripped Robert's shoulder. You are still a soldier, and soldiers take care of each other. That is the code. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Charles signaled to Antonio. Did you have a shower facility here? Staff bathroom? Antonio nodded. Yes, in the back. For employees. Can you find some clean clothes? Does not have to be fancy. Just clean. I believe I have some clothes in my locker. We are about the same size. Antonio gestured to Robert. Good. Sergeant Morrison is going to clean up. While he is doing that, I need you to make a phone call. Charles pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. Call this number. It is a friend of mine who runs a Veterans Assistance Program. Tell him Charles sent you. Tell him I have a veteran who needs immediate housing, job placement assistance, and medical evaluation. Tell him I will cover all costs personally. Antonio took the card, nodding. Charles turned back to Robert. When you are cleaned up, we are going to get you set up with a place to stay, not a shelter, an actual apartment. And tomorrow, you are going to meet with some people who are going to help you get back on your feet. Job training, counseling, if you want it, whatever you need. Robert was shaking his head. I cannot accept this. It is too much. You can and you will, Charles said firmly. Because here is what is going to happen, Sergeant. You are going to get yourself together. You are going to find work. You are going to build a life. And then, someday, when you are stable and strong, you are going to find another veteran who needs help. And you are going to do for them what I am doing for you. That is how this works. We take care of each other. Robert stared at him, tears streaming down his face. I do not even know how to thank you. Do not thank me. Just do what I said. Help the next guy. While Robert showered and changed, Charles spoke with his friend on the phone, the one who ran the veterans program. He arranged for immediate temporary housing in a veteran-friendly boarding house. He set up appointments with a counselor, a job placement specialist, and a doctor. And he established a trust fund to cover Robert's expenses for the first year while he got back on his feet. The total cost? Charles never disclosed it. But those close to him estimated it was somewhere around $50,000. When Robert emerged from the back, clean, shaved, wearing borrowed but clean clothes, he looked like a different person. The hollow desperation was still in his eyes, but there was something else now. Hope, the faintest glimmer of possibility. Charles stood. My driver is outside. He is going to take you to your new place. It is already paid for. The address is here. He handed Robert a piece of paper. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., someone named Marcus will pick you up. He is going to help you navigate everything. Do you understand? Robert nodded, still speechless. Charles walked him to the door. Outside, a black car was waiting. Charles opened the door for Robert. Before Robert got in, he turned and grabbed Charles in a hug. Charles stiffened for a moment. He was not a man comfortable with physical affection from strangers, but then he relaxed and hugged back. "I will not let you down," Robert whispered. "I swear to God I will not let you down." "I know you will not, soldier." Robert got in the car. Charles watched it drive away, disappearing into the Los Angeles night. Antonio approached from behind. "That was an extraordinary thing you did, Mr. Bronson." Charles turned. "It was just dinner." "It was considerably more than dinner, sir." Charles pulled out his wallet again and handed Antonio another $500. "For the staff, Antonio. Nobody hears about this. Not the press, not your friends. Nobody. Understood?" "Completely understood, sir." Charles Bronson walked to his own car and drove home. He never spoke about that night publicly. He never mentioned it in interviews. He never used it to build his image or reputation. But the story did not end there. Robert Morrison did exactly what Charles told him to do. He stayed in the boarding house. He attended his counseling sessions. He worked with the job placement specialist and found work as a mechanic, skill he would learned in the Army. Within 6 months, he had his own apartment. Within a year, he would saved enough to buy a used car. Within 2 years, he would been promoted to shop foreman, and he never forgot Charles's instruction: help the next guy. Robert began volunteering at the Veterans Assistance Program that had helped him. He donated part of his paycheck every month. He personally reached out to homeless veterans he encountered on the streets, offering them the same hand that had been offered to him. Over the next 15 years, Robert Morrison directly helped 127 homeless veterans get off the streets. He paid for meals out of his own pocket. He drove them to appointments. He vouched for them with landlords. He gave them hope when they had none. He tried, repeatedly, to thank Charles Bronson. He wrote letters that were never answered, not because Charles was ignoring him, but because Charles genuinely did not want thanks. He showed up at a Death Wish premiere, hoping to see Charles, but security kept him away. He even tried contacting Charles's agent, but was politely told that Mr. Bronson did not accept personal meetings. It was not until 1998, 5 years before Charles died, that Robert finally got his chance. Charles was doing a rare public appearance at a veterans hospital in Los Angeles, visiting wounded soldiers. Robert heard about it and showed up. He waited for hours, until Charles was done with his official visit. As Charles was leaving, walking to his car, Robert approached. "Mr. Bronson?" Charles turned. He was 77 years old now, his face even more weathered, his body slower. He did not recognize Robert at first. "My name is Robert Morrison. 16 years ago, you bought me dinner at Musso and Frank. You changed my life." Recognition flickered in Charles's eyes. He studied Robert, taking in the clean clothes, the healthy appearance, the confident posture. "Sergeant Morrison, you look good." "I am good, thanks to you. I did what you told me. I helped the next guy, and the next one, and the one after that. I have helped 127 veterans get off the streets. I just wanted you to know. I wanted you to know that what you did that night, it did not just save me. It saved 127 other people too." Charles was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "Thank you for your service, Sergeant." Both then and now, they shook hands. Robert had prepared a speech, things he wanted to say, gratitude he wanted to express. But looking into Charles's eyes, he realized none of it was necessary. Charles understood. "Take care of yourself," Charles said. Then he got in his car and drove away. That was the last time they saw each other. Charles Bronson died in 2003. Robert Morrison attended the funeral, standing in the back, just one of hundreds of people paying respects. After Charles's death, Robert felt he was finally released from the promise of secrecy, he began telling the story of that night at Musso and Frank. Not to the press, he respected Charles too much for that, but to other veterans, to people in the assistance program, to anyone who needed to hear that sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, a stranger can appear and change everything. The staff at Musso and Frank, those who would been there that night, eventually began sharing the story too. It became part of the restaurant's unofficial history, a tale told in quiet moments to regular customers, a reminder that Hollywood was not always shallow, that fame did not automatically mean selfishness. Antonio Macrado would have that night kept the $3,000 in cash as long as he could, not wanting to deposit it, wanting to hold on to the physical reminder of what he would witnessed. Eventually, he had to deposit it for practical reasons, but he kept the deposit receipt framed in his office until the day he retired. The booth where Charles and Robert sat that night became something of a shrine, though the restaurant never officially acknowledged it. Staff would mention it to certain customers. Veterans who came in were sometimes quietly offered that booth at no extra charge. In 2015, a group of veterans Robert had helped decided to do something to honor both men. They raised money and commissioned a small plaque. It was never installed at Musso and Frank. The restaurant politely declined, wanting to respect Charles's desire for privacy. But it was installed at the Veterans Assistance Program that had helped Robert and continues to help others. The plaque reads, "In memory of Charles Bronson, who taught us that heroes do not need publicity, they just need to act. And in honor of Robert Morrison, who proved that one act of kindness can echo through generations. November 11 Farren Faus, Nont Farren Faus, 1940 Farren Faus." His obituary, written by his daughter, mentioned his service in Vietnam, his work helping homeless veterans, and the night a movie star gave him a second chance at life. At his funeral, 94 veterans attended, many of them people Robert had personally helped. Several told stories of how Robert had found them on the streets, bought them meals, helped them find housing, gave them hope. One veteran, woman named Sandra, who Robert had helped in 2003, stood up and said, "Robert used to tell us about the night Charles Bronson saved his life. He would say, 'That man did not just buy me dinner. He gave me back my dignity. He reminded me I was still a soldier, still worthy of respect.' And then Robert would do the same for us. He would look at us, really look at us, not through us or past us, but at us, and we would remember we were still human." The story of Charles Bronson and Robert Morrison is not the kind of story Hollywood usually tells. There is no dramatic showdown, no explosions, no violence. It is just a man with means helping a man without them. It is just kindness, pure and uncomplicated. But in its own way, it is more revealing than any of Charles's famous roles. It shows who he was when the cameras were not rolling, when there was no benefit to being generous, when the only reward was knowing he would help another veteran. Charles Bronson played heroes on screen, but on November 11, 1982, in a restaurant on Hollywood Boulevard, he simply was one. No cameras, no publicity, no acclaim. Just a veteran helping another veteran. Just a man with power using it to protect someone powerless. Just Charles Bronson being exactly who he was when nobody was watching. And for Robert Morrison, for the 127 veterans he helped, for their families and friends, and everyone their lives touched, that one night of unexpected kindness rippled outward like waves from a stone thrown into still water. Charles Bronson bought out a restaurant for $3,000, but the real cost was $50,000, and the real value immeasurable, because he did not just save one life that night. He saved hundreds, and he never asked for credit, never sought recognition, never wanted anything, except to know that a fellow soldier was not going to starve on the streets. That is not just generosity. That is honor. That is the code. That is soldiers taking care of soldiers. That is Charles Bronson.